This is the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neman. If you're looking to generate wealth and passive income in the lucrative world of mobile home parks, you're in the right place. You'll discover solutions to the common legal and operational pitfalls and how to optimize parks to maximize income. Your host is in the trenches. He's a real estate attorney, financial analyst, and mobile home park investor and operator. Now, let's turn it over to Ferd Neman.
Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd Neman here again today with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Today's another solo episode, and I've been thinking about this one because I've been doing a little bit of title review, survey review, easement review, reading easements, covenants, restrictions, all that fun stuff that everybody loves to do. Recently it was on an apartment complex, really an office building that we're converting to an apartment complex, but it was relevant and related. And the challenge for buyers on a lot of these things is they don't really think there's much risk on what's in the dirt. They understand like the dirt can't have cancer or some sort of chemical, some sort of phase one issue, but they don't realize the dirt includes more than just the physical makeup, but it includes the title, the easements, access problems, etc. So I want to just cover just some high level, like what it's like. You think this deal's amazing. Oh, it's it's a mobile home park. It's 70 pads. It's 90% occupied, below market rents. Oh my gosh, this is great. Seller says we've never had a problem. Well, translation, nobody's really looked, or possibly they never looked. I had a client, it's been about 4 or 5 years ago. He called me and was new in the game, but was very active, kind of one of those Wall Street guys with a ton of money behind him, smart guy, but little green, little ignorant on real estate, more of a banker type guy. And he called me and said, "Hey, I need a Missouri attorney. I heard you're a Missouri attorney and I need a Missouri lease." I said, "I can give you a Missouri lease. Here's what I charge." And I said, "Hey, you guys, presumably you're buying something in Missouri." And he said, Yeah. I said, "Do you need help with your contract?" No, we got that. We're kind of street lawyers. We read that stuff ourselves. Okay. I said, "Who's reviewing your title?" He said, we do that ourselves." I said, are you competent and trained? It wasn't trying to be insulting because I was a smart guy. I said, "But are you trained for title review?" He said, well, what do you charge?" And I said, "Well, we charge by the hour. And typically reviewing a title commitment is going to take, on the short end, 30 minutes to button it up. On the long end, 1 to 2 hours. I said, if there's a bunch of exception documents with easements, covenant restrictions, it could take 100 hours. A shopping center, they used to take a ton because of all the restrictions and all that kind of stuff. But on a typical mobile home park deal, we're talking total, 1 to 3 hours, maybe 1 to 4. He goes, "Oh, well, that's not that much. Okay, we'll have you do it." I said, "Great. Do you have a survey?" And he said, "No, we don't buy surveys. They're too expensive." I said, how many deals you bought?" He said, "I bought 32 deals last quarter." And I said, "But you can't afford surveys." He goes, "No, we don't deal with surveys." I said, "Well, in that case, my review is going to be shorter because I don't need to look at a survey anymore, but it's going to be a rough estimate of a review because I can't look. I'm not a cartographer. I don't map where the gas lines are based on a 4-page legal description. It's just not my skill set. So I need somebody else to survey it, put it on the map, and then I can review it." So it just reminded me that even big players don't look at this kind of stuff. So the dirt, it involves like, where are the roads, where are the utility lines, where's the access, where's the easements, where's the encroachments. You're not just buying dirt. You're buying every mistake for the last 1,000 years on that land. And access is a big one. I worked on an apartment deal one time. It was 2 big apartment complexes. Our client was buying, building 2. It looked like there was a drive, a shared drive. Turns out the original owner owned building 1 and building 2 and had a single drive, which belonged to building 1. No access easement, no rights, no land for the building 2 to use. We would have been potentially stuck. So we need to look at that. Well, we look at that based on the title work, the survey, things of that sort. So if there's not a recorded easement, it's not real. If your parcel's landlocked, if you supposedly have access over a neighboring parcel, I've seen things where like a footpath, like The farmer gave a walking easement to the neighbor to get to the water, to get to the electricity. Not a car, not a tenant, things like that. So again, if it's not recorded, it's not real. And access issues can be a problem with mobile home parks. I've got a couple parks that are really narrow roads, and you risk this impacts your zoning and your infill rights. If the city said, that just happened to a client actually, where the city said, well, you're grandfathered in, because there's really only three things that can trump your grandfather rights. One is nuisance, which is a technical process. It's a pain in the butt. One is abandonment, which is somewhat rare, even though cities try to expand it in their respect. And the third is life safety, the quote, public health, safety, welfare, morals of the community, unquote. But what is life safety? It's ingress and egress, two access points, wide enough roads for an emergency vehicle, fire hydrants, distance to the road, distance from a main highway, things like that. So I had a situation where a client there were homes like right up against this main road, which was technically a state highway. Well, the home moved out, home burned down. He wanted to bring a new home in. They said it's 11 feet from the highway. And we're like, yeah, like the other 20 along the highway, like they've been for 50 years. And they said, yeah, but the code's 50, the modern code. When I say, the modern code doesn't matter, it's from 1999. This park's been here since 1960. You guys weren't even a city till 1970. I'm grandfathered in, which was an aggressive position by me. And they said, and because of the following thing that they astutely said, they said, yeah, but it's a life safety issue. You can't have homes 11 feet from a highway. Just not safe. Boom. Problem. Now, some of that you can evaluate on site, some of that with the title commitment, some with the survey. So you need emergency access. Easements. Okay, let's talk about those. There's different types of easements: utilities, drainage, access, pipelines, shared wells, or sewer easements. I had a client bought a property. It wasn't a mobile home park next door. It was like I think it was a hotel or motel next door. They had a shared sewer plant. Well, the cost sharing was 50-50. The motel had been out of business for like 3 years. It was supposedly under remodel. Well, we were going through the infill of our park, we, the client. What happens if they need 50 more people using the toilet? They might need to upgrade the system. You're going to call on your new neighbor, the motel, who's going to kick in $500,000, but they're not operating. What if they don't kick in their half? Well, I don't know. What's the easement agreement say? And even if it says that they have to, what are you going to do if they don't have the money? You're going to pay both halves. You didn't budget for the second half. Your bank doesn't like the second half. So you got to read these documents and try to negotiate things, modify them, look at other things like that. I'm in the middle of a property infill, and there's a drainage easement. It's kind of crazy to me because it's like up on a cliff, and the little creek is 20 feet below grade, but the easement's been there since 1960, so they don't want me infilling too close to the creek. So now I'm paying for it's called a hydraulic and hydrologic study, an H&S or H&H study. It's like 10 grand. Good grief, 10 grand. But that's what the city wants, so you got to do it on most instances. So drainage is important, shared infrastructure is important, title issues. I mean, this stuff can be hairy. Boundary problems. We see a lot of this where it's like fences over the boundary. Not a big deal, in my opinion. Sheds, not a big deal. Mobile homes can be a bigger deal. Road, much bigger deal. We see this somewhat commonly. Um, Encroachments onto when somebody else's shed. You probably don't care that much. It's when the bigger issue is when your mobile homes are on the neighbor's property, and then the neighbor gets pissy and makes you move them. You got to move them 2 feet, not a big deal. I had a client in Missouri. They had it kind of made a little bit of a mistake where they had the property surveyed and they gave a copy as the quote site plan to the municipality, and then it showed there were like 5 homes over the boundary. Well, the city wouldn't give them a business license because encroaching on your neighbor is quote illegal. They would not permit an illegal business, so they couldn't get a business license. Without a business license, you can't get an infill permit. So then these homes just sitting there. So we had to go get an easement or buy the land from the adjacent property owner. The problem was the adjacent property owner was a massive industrial facility, like 5 million square feet, and it was from a major, I can't say who, but we'll call them American Airlines, but it wasn't them. It was somebody bigger than that that owned the facility next door. So good luck. And I tried getting a hold of the bigger American Airlines to ask them for 12 feet of land for the trailer park. And they didn't even know it was a problem because adjacent to the trailer park was a 50-foot tree line, a creek, and then 50-foot tree line, and then an industrial park. We couldn't get it done. So then when the city says, well, you got to move all the homes, we got to move the homes all 12 feet. Well, actually, they were like 2 feet to 10 feet or something like that. But then you move the homes. So you got to move the tenants out. You got to move their gear out for the manufacturer or for the mover to do it. Then you got to, oh, now you disconnect electricity. Well, now it's not the same electricity. Now you got to upgrade a pedestal. And pretty soon you're in for 10,000 a whack for all these homes. So it becomes a problem. Other title issues that pop up, liens, weird exceptions, oil and gas reservations. We see things like I saw an easement for a Colorado Department of Transportation. Believe it or not, these mountains or these volcanoes still exist, like ever-flowing volcanoes, and they're not like the ones you see in the movies, where like shooting up 1,000 feet. They're just pushing out like a little bit of lava every day. Well, that lava solidifies, but the highway department in Colorado scoops it up, puts it in trucks, and takes it out on state highways, and they drop it. It becomes asphalt roads. Believe it or not. Well, we had the client that they had an easement right through the middle of their park for the Department of Transportation to access that volcano, which they did apparently every Monday. And the trucks drove down the middle of the street in the mobile home park, so it wasn't a big deal. But the easement allowed them to blow through the north half of the park. So a 50-unit park could easily become 25 if the state wants to put a new road in. Was it a high probability risk? No. Does it happen? Yes. Could it happen? Yes. Another client that had a Verizon or a Sprint or somebody cell phone tower. It's just a lease. Okay, good. They got a tower. We saw the tower. We knew it existed. No big deal. Maybe it even pays 2,000 a year rent or 2,000 a month rent. It's a benefit. Well, what's in the lease? You don't know unless you read it. You don't know about it unless you see if it's recorded. Sprint's going to record their lease. They're smart. It says that they have a right of first refusal. Maybe they want to buy this land. They probably don't. Now, if the Kansas City Chiefs just announced a new headquarters, well, if it was on that land, they'd probably buy it because all of a sudden the land's worth 100x. But most time it's just a trick bag. They want you to forget to give them that notice of sale, and then they can get 5 years free rent. They can penalize you, things like this. You see, in common area buildings, mostly in apartments, but sometimes in MH, you see laundromats. In the laundromat facility company, they put in a lot of infrastructure. They put in a lot of money in that equipment. So what do they want? They want the right to be there for 20 years, and they want the right to have the lease continue. Well, if you don't do it properly, there could be a penalty to you or to the new buyer. So you got to see what's in the document. You're not going to know as easily unless you look at the title. I don't care if it's been there for 40 years and no one's noticed. You got to read it. And then even if you don't read it, you get away with it. What about the next buyer? I can tell you the lawyers for Fannie Mae or CMBS, they're going to read it. Maybe the buyer lawyers, but definitely the bank's lawyers are going to read that kind of stuff. So boom, it's going to delay your closing, it's going to kill your refinance, it's going to reduce your buyer pool, all that, all that. We had a big deal. This was a storage deal, and it was mostly storage buildings, but there was a retail component to it because it was a big portfolio. And there was an issue where behind the little retail shopping center, there was like a house and like a pool. And for whatever reason, like the guy at the pool had somehow secured like 20 feet, but it was like unclear. So the bank's like, can't do it. Next to another shopping center or storage center, there was a gravel road that was meaningless, but it was a little pizza pie slice of the land of 10 feet that was improperly surveyed. Well, it slows down the whole deal. And if you got a seller that's contentious, they don't want to give you an extension, you may not have the time. Even though it was a de minimis portion of the portfolio, the buyer, my client, would have been like, I don't care. Let the neighbor have it. Yeah, but it's part of the contract. Yeah, it's part of the seller's portfolio. Yeah, it's not subdivided properly. So if you get a seller that's cantankerous, they can make your life difficult. So you got to look at this kind of stuff. This is not one of those penny pinchers. I talked to somebody the other day, and he's like, "Hey, should I review title? Should I pay for zoning?" He was going to open like a startup bank. Should I require? And the borrower's going to pay all these things, but you can't push too many costs on the borrower, or it's going to kill the deal. Should I make the borrower pay for phase one? Should I make him pay for the? And I'm like, yes. I mean, in general, you can't overkill. Like, I wouldn't do a table A Alta survey on everything because it might be 10 grand, but a base Alta survey is $3,000 to $5,000. Like, if I'm the bank, I want to require it. If I'm the borrower, I generally do it. Now, there's occasionally instances where I'm like, I know enough from walking the park. Like, I have a park that I was talking about today with a broker. It's huge. All the lots are flat. You can see that with your eyeballs. All the lots are big. You can see that with your eyeballs. So there's not really like an infill zoning issue. I have a good zoning letter from the city, and I have private water and private sewer, propane heat, and I don't really care what telecom is because they don't really record stuff anyway. So it's like, what are you going to get in a survey? I can tell from the plat the boundaries of the property in the county GIS, and Alta surveys can tell me the easements. There's not really any easements. It's all private stuff. It's 2 miles outside of town. I don't even have an electricity easement. They're just like there. And we look the other way because they're there and we know they're there and it's their power, but like they don't have a legal right to be there. So sometimes I don't need an Alta survey. But practically, serious buyers should order a survey, overlay the title commitment, and then if you're really good, and this is where I can't help you as a lawyer, I don't walk the property with you. It's just not feasible based on geography in most cases. But like personally, I've walked the property with the survey in hand, even with the utility people. And then I want to verify, like, are these access easements, are they recorded? Are they perpetual, pertinent, wide enough? I want to confirm my utility locations. Maybe I'll ask the municipality. Sometimes you gotta dance around. Do you want to ask or do you want to keep silent on some municipal things? But zoning you want to ask. But like, do you want to ask like, hey, are these power lines high enough? They meet fire code? Is this road wide enough? You might not want to ask that. Now, if you're going to expand, you need to. And you want to review if there's any shared infrastructure stuff, like the sewer plant I mentioned earlier. You got to look at that. Ultimately, you just got to realize like title issues, easement issues, they don't like just show up out of nowhere. They've been there, but they show up in your life when you're going to expand the park, when you're going to refinance, when you're going to sell, when your neighbor gets hostile. So ideally, you thinking, 3, 4, 5 years ahead. I told somebody a day or two ago, they said, hey, do I need to get a survey? And I said, this is a big office complex and they're converting it to apartments. And there's a ton of, they call them, quote, exception documents, exceptions to clean title, because they're things of record. And I said, look, originally there was parcel one, and there's like an image of like the infrastructure building for Sprint's cell tower. Then there's like document or easement number two that talks about a shared road. Then there's number three that talks about, an acquisition here. And there's another one, so on and so on. There's like 20 of these. It's a big complex. I have to read them all a la carte, which in theory I could print them all off and line them up, but they're different ages. Some of them are like not hand drawn, but like hand drawn by an architect, so they're mostly to scale. These are from 60 years ago. They're not like computer generated. So I said, I recommend paying for an Alta survey. And again, I don't sell Alta surveys. This is not me trying to make more money off of you. I said, I recommend you pay for it because the surveyor is trained to lay all these exceptions out together. And it's a small cost, not insignificant. I mean, it's going to be 5 to 10 grand, but in the scope of this purchase price, it's a small cost. If the deal doesn't close, yeah, it sucks. If the deal closes, it's a rounding error. So I said, but if you can provide me all those things, I can intelligently review the image with the title documents, exception documents. I said, here's the deal. I know the guy's business plan because he's done this on several other properties. Your business plan is not to just like convert it to apartments and hold it forever. Your business plan is to either refinance it with HUD or Fannie or Freddie or sell it. At the time you refinance with HUD, like the last couple of transactions, we know from experience they're going to make you order a survey. So you're going to have to pay for it either way. If you're going to spend millions and millions of dollars in construction cost, what's another 5 to 10 grand looking at it on the front end? So I think, the best practice is thinking 5 years ahead. Because you're not just buying a deal for upside or for cash flow, you're buying the control. And if you don't control the access, the infrastructure, the boundaries, etc., you don't really control the asset. You're just controlling the risk, where you're really renting risk or shifting risk to you. So hopefully this gives you some practical and maybe scary hypotheticals of things that I've left out a lot of examples because it's not, this isn't going to go on for 2 hours here. But there's lots of times that you really need to look at the title and survey. Unfortunately, this is one of those things where a lot of times clients like, you looked at it, I paid you $500. What'd you find? Nothing. It looks good. And they're like, so I wasted $500. Like, maybe personally, I have life insurance for the benefit of my wife and kids. I didn't die yesterday. So did I waste the premium in theory? Or did I pay the premium in case I died yesterday to insulate me from the risk? Statistically, all else being equal, I was not supposed to die yesterday. I could yesterday, I could today, I could tomorrow. But statistically, I'm not going to do any of the above. But if I do, my wife and kids get a multiple, multi-million-dollar single premium settlement or single payment settlement. I didn't pay millions and millions of dollars of premiums, right? So it's a risk reward scenario. And if you buy a property and the risk hits you, you're going to wish you mitigated it. So just encourage people to look at the title commitment, read all the exception documents. If your title company does not hyperlink them, they immediately drop to B. If they do not at least give you PDF attachments of the exception documents, they immediately drop to D or F. It's not that hard. It's standard practice. Not even like best in class. It's standard practice. But I still get title companies and they'll send me a title commitment and I'll say, you have 32 exception documents. Where are they? That's where the bodies are buried. And they're like, oh, you want those too? Yeah, I want those too. Because there are lots of examples of times where that's where the bodies are buried. And yes, why would I not? So anyway, don't trust the title company. Look at it yourself or hire someone else to do it because it could cause a lot of pain. So be diligent out there. Until next time, thanks and God bless.
You've been listening to the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neman. Ready to learn more? Go to www.themobilehomelawyer.com for free resources and materials to help you succeed. If you love the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, give us your review, and subscribe today. Thank you for listening. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri nor the Missouri Bar reviews nor approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.